Hey there, welcome to the Legal Influence Podcast. My name is Kate Cooper, and if you're just joining for the first time, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a Colorado attorney and an outdoor content creator, and I started the Legal Influence to provide accessible legal education and resources to other content creators so that they can build thriving businesses and get paid what they're worth. In today's episode, we're going to talk about the 3 types of legal documents that you should have on your blog. So this one is for all of my bloggers out there or creators who are interested in starting a blog. As always, I have to provide some quick disclaimers before we dive in. Nothing that I share today should be considered personal legal advice. Everything is for informational and educational purposes only. While I am an attorney, I am not your attorney, and listening to this episode does not create an attorney-client relationship between you and I. So let's talk about blogging. Now, I absolutely love blogging. It's actually my favorite type of content to create. I have an outdoor adventure blog that I try to update weekly, although lately my posts have been a bit fewer and farther between because I've been spending most of my time on the Legal Influence. But I consider my blog to be my baby, and I really think that blogs are one of the best ways that creators can provide information and genuine value to their audience. You only have so many characters in an Instagram caption, but on your blog, you can write as much as you need to in order to get your point across or provide all of the necessary information people need to know about a certain topic. So I really like blogs, and I think that most influencers should have one, especially if you don't have another platform where you share long form content like a YouTube channel or a podcast. Now, when it comes to blogging, there are a lot of different platforms that are out there that you can use, but I recommend having your own website where the blog is located. This is going to be a platform that you own, you can control it, and it gives you a lot of options when it comes to eventually monetizing your blog. So WordPress is probably going to be the most popular blogging platform that you can build your own website on. It's really easy to blog on. It's good for SEO. I don't want to say it's the best because I don't personally know that information, but it's definitely the platform that most blogging experts recommend being on for SEO purposes. The biggest downside is that building a website, a self-hosted WordPress website, can be very challenging. There's a huge learning curve, especially if you want to make it look, kind of fancy. So that's the downside to WordPress. So personally, my website itself is built on Showit. So that's the platform that I use to actually build out the pages of my blog. But the reason I have Showit is because it's connected to WordPress for blogging purposes. So it's easy for me to actually create the blog, much easier than if I were trying to do it in WordPress itself. But I still get the benefits of having WordPress as the blogging host. There are also other platforms out there like Squarespace or Wix where you can build your website. And from my understanding, these platforms are much easier to use than trying to create a self-hosted WordPress website. But I don't have experience with those platforms. Anyway, this episode isn't about how to actually build out your blog. That would be its own episode on its own day. But I wanted to provide some context about what I'm talking about when I say your website or your blog. I'm really using the two words interchangeably. Your blog is on your website. So today I want to talk about the 3 types of legal documents that you should have on your blog. And this is going to include website terms and conditions, a privacy policy, which is required by law, and a disclaimer policy, depending on the type of blog that you have. So the first legal document I recommend having for your blog are terms and conditions. And these are basically the rules of the road for your website. It's going to be the contract that you have with your readers. Now, you're not required to have terms and conditions on your website, but it's a really good idea because this is going to be the place where you let readers know what they can and cannot do on the website. And this is largely going to be information around your content and how people can use your content. For example, you probably don't want people stealing your content. So your terms will outline exactly what is permitted and what is not permitted. And you may still have other legal protections like copyright protections, but having these terms and conditions gives you another avenue that you can potentially pursue if something inappropriate or nefarious happens. In addition to covering how people can use your intellectual property, your terms and conditions should also cover things like the types of comments that people are allowed to leave on your website and how people can use certain features that your site may offer. So informing people about what they can and cannot do on the website or with your content that's on the website is one of the biggest reasons why having terms and conditions is so important. Another reason you also want to have some terms and conditions on your website is because they should also be providing you with legal protections. Things like limiting your liability or providing or not providing certain warranties or representations about your website. For example, if you have outdated information on your blog and someone relies on it and is harmed in some way, not physically, hopefully, but let's say, just hypothetically, someone decides to fly all the way to France to try a restaurant that you recommended on your blog, but they get there and the restaurant is now closed permanently. And now they're out all of this money from flying to France. So they decide to sue you. You don't want to be liable for that. And you shouldn't be. It's on them to follow up and do their due diligence to verify the restaurant that they want to go to is actually open before they get on a flight. That's not your responsibility. Now, that's obviously a very silly example. That's intentional. But we, especially in the United States, live in a very litigious society, and people file lawsuits for silly reasons all of the time. So in this situation, you'd want to have language in your terms and conditions that say, hey, we're not guaranteeing that the information on the website is up to date. So we're going to talk more about covering what your blog should have legally when we talk about legal disclaimer policies. But there are a lot of ways to help minimize your risks and liabilities inside of your terms and conditions. So it's important to have terms and conditions that outline the guidelines of your website. And if you need to create terms and conditions for your website, I have a brand new Blogger terms and conditions template that is now live in the Legal Influence contract shop. And this template is designed specifically for bloggers, particularly newer bloggers who want to have legal protection in place for your website. It's really easy to customize, so you can tailor it to your own blog and what you're doing on your website. For example, if you sell digital products on your website, there are some terms you're going to want to put into your terms and conditions that deal with that. With that said, I still recommend having separate terms of purchase or terms of use for those digital products, just so you can go a little bit more in depth on specific policies for that. And the specific terms that you have regarding those purchases. And then those terms will be incorporated into your website terms and conditions. My Blogger terms and conditions template also includes information about free downloads or other freebies that you may have on your blog that you use to grow your email list. And there are a lot of terms included to help protect you from liability, from things like misuse of your website or from copyright infringement. So it's very comprehensive and designed to give you some peace of mind when it comes to your blog. And that template will be linked in the show notes, so you can check that out. So the next type of legal document that you need to have on your website is a privacy policy. This is something that you're required to have by law, and its purpose is to let visitors to your website know how you're collecting, storing, and using their personal information and data. Now, as a blogger, I'm assuming you're probably not doing anything too crazy when it comes to people's data, but you probably are collecting data. For example, you might have a contact form on your website or opt-ins to your email list where people are required to provide their name and email address. If you have Google Analytics on your website, which most bloggers do, you're collecting a lot of data from people when they come to your website. So your privacy policy is there to let people know what you're doing with that data. And it's really important that your privacy policy is accurate. So for example, if your privacy policy says that you don't sell people's data, but you actually do, and maybe you don't even realize that you do, that's going to be problematic. Our good friends over at the FTC, they're not going to like that. Now, as I mentioned, your privacy policy is a document that you are legally required to have on your website. And there are a number of different privacy laws out there around the United States and the world, and there are new laws coming into effect fairly regularly. But it's important to note that all of these laws may not apply to you or your website. In fact, if you're a brand new blogger, you're probably not going to meet the thresholds necessary for certain privacy laws to apply to you. And I'll talk about a couple of those in a minute. But one law that is almost always going to apply for bloggers is GDPR, otherwise known as the General Data Protection Regulation. And this is a law that protects privacy rights for citizens and residents of the European Union. So if your website collects personal information from people in the EU, then GDPR is going to apply. And that's going to be most bloggers. If you have any traffic from the EU, then you're probably also collecting data from those people, which means you're required to have a privacy policy that contains certain information about their rights, along with information about what data you collect, how you keep it secure, what you do with it. People have to have the option to opt out of having data collected. That's likely going to be a little cookie pop-up that lets people accept or reject the cookies. There are a lot of different things to include in there to make your privacy policy GDPR compliant. Now, as I mentioned, there are also other privacy laws that are out there that have similar disclosure obligations regarding people's personal information. You're typically going to see a lot of overlap with what's required by GDPR. That's definitely one of the more strict laws that are out there, but different laws may require different things. So different privacy laws also have different threshold requirements that need to be met in order for those laws to apply to a certain business or website. For example, the big privacy law that went into effect earlier this year is the California Consumer Privacy Act. And you probably got some email updates from large corporations who updated their privacy policies. And this law is a big reason why. Now, in order to be subject to the requirements under the California Consumer Privacy Act, you need to either A, have a gross annual revenue of over $25 million. And I think it's safe to say that's not going to be applicable to most bloggers out there. Or B, you buy, sell, or share the personal information of 100,000 or more California residents or households. So again, probably not applicable to most bloggers unless you have a huge California readership and you're also buying, selling, or sharing their data. Or C, you derive 50% or more of your annual revenue from selling California residents' personal information. Again, probably not going to be the case for most bloggers. Another example is the Colorado Privacy Act. This actually goes into effect on July 1st, 2024, so it's coming up. But in order to be subject to it, you need to conduct business in Colorado or deliver commercial products or services targeted to residents of Colorado, and either A, process the personal data of more than 100,000 consumers in any calendar year. And that word process is going to be a little bit more broad than that California law. It's going to include things like collecting and storing data. It's not as, specific as buying, selling, or sharing. And then consumers are defined as Colorado residents. So either collecting, processing 100,000 Colorado residents' data in a calendar year, or you derive revenue or receive discounts on goods or services in exchange for the sale of personal data of 25,000 or more Colorado residents. So again, if you have a huge Colorado readership, let's say your Google Analytics tells you that you're getting more than 100,000 unique visitors from Colorado in a calendar year and you're processing their data, then this law should be on your radar and it should be addressed in your privacy policy. But again, that's probably not going to be the case for most bloggers out there, especially if you're newer. I'm based in Colorado, so I have a lot of blog articles about Colorado specifically. It's the state that I get the most blog traffic from, and I'm currently on track to have a little more than 10,000 visitors from Colorado on my website this year. And that number might go up, especially in the fall, but I'm not selling any of that data, so I know I'm not going to be anywhere near close enough to hitting the threshold for the CPA to apply to me. But it is something that's on my radar because I do conduct business in Colorado. And if my blog does pick up traffic in the future, I could potentially hit that threshold. So if you have substantial traffic to your blog, let's say you're a really established blogger, you're already on an ad network, you're getting hundreds of thousands of views, odds are good you probably already have these legal documents in place, but maybe you want to learn something new by listening to this episode. Ideally, you're also going to be making money from your blog if you have that substantial traffic. So it's going to be worth it for you to talk to an attorney to have a custom terms and condition and privacy policy drafted for your website. just to make sure that it covers any specific laws that you personally are subject to. But if you're a new blogger, you don't have a ton of traffic yet, and you're not out selling data, GDPR is going to be the big law that your privacy policy should cover, at least for now. There have been attempts to have a national privacy policy law passed in the United States. So that's something that could happen in the future, and that might be something that applies broadly. But right now, GDPR is kind of what you need to be concerned about. It is worth noting that the penalties for not having a privacy policy under GDPR are quite steep. We're talking millions of euros. And obviously, other privacy laws have their own penalties, which again is why it's important to know what laws your website needs to comply with. And if you don't have a privacy policy on your website right now, don't freak out too much. I also have a GDPR compliant privacy policy template now available in the Legal Influence contract shop. And this is really designed for newer bloggers, again, looking to cover their legal bases and disclose the privacy information that they're collecting. And I'll also have that linked in the show notes for you as well. Now, the last type of legal document or policy that you need on your website are proper disclaimers. Now, the type of disclaimer policy you may need on your website is going to depend largely on what you're blogging about. For example, if you're a fashion blogger sharing your outfits of the day, you're probably going to need to have an affiliate disclaimer policy because you're likely sharing affiliate links in those posts. And an affiliate disclaimer is something that is going to be very short. It's just to let people know that if they click on a link, you may receive a small commission if they make a purchase and that there's no additional cost to them. And that type of disclaimer is, again, something that's required by law in the United States by the FTC. US consumers have a right to know when you may have a financial incentive to share something. So other countries likely have their own laws around affiliate link disclosure, so make sure you check those out. It's also worth noting that different affiliate platforms may also have their own language that they want you to put into your affiliate disclaimer. Amazon Associates is one example. I'm sure there's more out there. And ideally, they're going to tell you that kind of upfront when they accept you in the program. But an affiliate disclaimer is something that a lot of bloggers are going to have to include because affiliate links are a very common way to monetize your blog, even as a newer blogger. Now, depending on the specific topics that you're talking about on your blog, you may need other disclaimers as well. For example, on the Legal Influence website, I obviously have legal disclaimers, and that's something that I'm actually required to have as a licensed attorney, but it also just makes it clear to visitors that I'm not providing legal advice. They need to speak with an attorney for individual advice, and that I'm not their attorney. It's very similar to the disclaimers that I give at the beginning of these episodes. So things like legal information or financial information, business information, those are topics that you're going to want to make sure that you have proper disclaimers around. Other topics that you're going to want to provide disclaimers for include things like health, fitness, nutrition, anything that's potentially medically related. You should also ideally have proper credentials to be sharing this information. That's something that Google kind of looks at when they're using their algorithm to rank blog posts. Now, if you write about topics, let's say like travel or sports, you may also want to still include certain disclaimers. So I have a hiking disclaimer on my outdoor adventure blog because I provide information on the blog that people might use to help get them outdoors. But once they get that information, I can't control whether they're actually properly prepared or behaving safely when they actually hit the trail. So I don't want to be liable for their safety on a hike. That's their personal responsibility. So there are a lot of different types of disclaimers that are out there. And again, there's something that should be individually tailored to your blog. So to wrap things up, let's go over the 3 legal documents that you need on your blog once again. So number 1, your terms and conditions, aka the rules of your website. Number 2, your privacy policy to ensure that your blog is legally compliant. And you can get templates for both of those documents in my contract shop. And when you purchase either of them, you'll get the option to add the other at a discount. So you can bundle them together and save if you need both. And then number 3, you probably need to have some type of disclaimer policy, whether that's an affiliate disclaimer or something that's more specific to your blog and content. So thanks so much for listening to the Legal Influence podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode of the show, I would love for you to do me a favor and leave a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform. And if you know any influencers or content creators who would benefit from this episode, please send it on to them. Talk to you soon.